Okay, hello. So today I thought I'd do a bit more of like a vlog style video showing what I'm making at the moment, which is the Poppy Coat by the Fabric Store's pattern brand. I've got it all cut out and piled here, but I'm going to be using a few really pretty coloured walls, and I'll flip the camera around and show you what my idea is. If you follow me on Instagram, you have already seen this because I put up a bunch of different ideas and I couldn't pick which one, so I asked votes on which one. Yes, I'm going to go through the process of how I'm making it. So this is the design that got the most votes, and also the one I was kind of leaning towards anyway. I did have this one, which is a little bit more like paint splattery. This one, I did like the idea of this one, but I kind of don't like that you only get like a sliver of orange at the front and then a sliver of purple. And also like the idea of matching up all these seams, just a headache. I mean, matching up the seams on all of these is going to be a headache. This one as well, like sewing all these curves, there's just like a lot of room for error. This one was fun. I actually really do like this one, but it does become a pain because it's not a mirror image, so like all of these would have to be separate pieces, whereas this one, this is a mirror image, even though my sketch isn't perfectly symmetrical, which means like I can cut these pieces on the fold and just cut a pair, which kind of makes it a little bit easier. All right, sorry, dog was barking. So I'm using these wool polyester blends from Darn Cheap. They're just a nice coat weight wool, really good for winter, and I love these colors for winter, add a really nice pop of color. And then I've got the pattern all cut out and printed out. I'm sewing the size 8 on the size chart that looks like it's going to be a good size for me. And first thing I'm going to do is sew it up in calico. One, because sewing up toiles always particularly good idea to check the fit, especially if it's a pattern you've never made before. But also, even though it doesn't really matter as much for this, in my opinion, because it's an oversized coat. But because of how I have the line set up, which hopefully, yeah, here, like they kind of follow on from the sleeve onto the body and everything, I'm gonna try to match that up. So I'm gonna make up the calico as is without those panel lines, and then I'm going to draw them on the calico, and then I'll know how to transfer them onto the pattern piece. If it was my own pattern, I'd feel comfortable doing it straight onto the pattern, but because I don't know exactly like where the sleeve meets the side seam and everything like that, I want to just make that toile up first, just to be doubly sure that everything's going to match up and look nice. I got 1 meter of each of these, and I am hoping that's enough. If it's not, I will have to get more. I would prefer not to though, or I might just alter the design a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to make this up in calico now, and I'm not going to do the lining or anything because I'm not doing any panel lines to that. And really this is just to do a quick fit check and quickly draw on where all these colors are going to go. Yeah. What I'm going to do is first mark the halfway point and then the quarter point, just because I do want this divided into the 4 colors and I want it somewhat even. I mean, obviously these lines aren't straight lines, but if I give myself that marking of 1/4, half and 3/4, at least then I know kind of where the block is. And I'll keep in mind that the hems are still on this, although they're not really big enough to make a huge difference in terms of the balance of it. So I'm going to mark it all on there. I'll probably do like a few lines, sort of play around with it. And then once I'm happy, I will trace over them in Sharpie and then copy them onto the pattern pieces. All right, hopefully you can see it because it is pencil on calico, so it's a little bit faint. But I've drawn in the line, so you can see I've done like a few different squiggly ones. I also very roughly drew in center front because I want this button actually doesn't sit at the center front. The center front is more here, which you can kind of see on the drawing, the center fronts where they cross. So I want this to truly be a mirror at the center front, and I want when it laps over for this line to keep going, and I feel like that can be achieved by mirroring at the center front, rather than if I did the like finish here, when I cut the pieces this line wouldn't match up, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Or I would have to cut two separate front pieces, and I'm not gonna get into that confusion. So I was thinking of doing like a little dip into the collar here, but that might be too much bulk for such a small detail. So I think I'm gonna just do it just underneath. There will be a color change here on the collar though, which I think that'll be okay. The bulk there, then this would have been really bulky. Yeah, so I've done 3 lines for purple, blue, orange, pink at the top, and I followed them around, so making sure it all matches up, and same with at the side seam, matches up, and then this also matches up here, so that either one touching it, it lines up. And I've done the same at the back, all the lines. So I'm going to trace them in Sharpie. I'll take it off the dress form to do that because it will be a little bit easier to draw. And then copy that onto the pattern piece. All right, so I Sharpied on all the markings, and now what I'm going to do is copy it onto the pattern. And to do that, I'm going to take the toile apart. It's a good idea when sewing any toiles, but particularly ones like this where you want to take it apart, to sew them with a really long stitch. So I actually sewed this with the longest stitch my machine would do, which is effectively a basting stitch. But it's really good if a toile goes wrong or you want to take it in or out or anything like that, because it's quick to undo. It's one thing I was taught at uni, to toile with a basting stitch. Obviously, if you're doing something really fitted and a basting stitch might not hold things together enough to fit, that's a different story. But for something like this, definite must, so that I can take it apart easily. Alright, so I went through and marked the lines on the pieces, and then I added seam allowance. So because these lines are, the center ones are going to be where the actual seam is once it's sewn up, I want to add a seam allowance on the outside of the piece. So for this blue piece in the middle, I've added to the outside. For the purple piece down here, I've added to the outside of that line, if that makes sense. And I've highlighted these lines so that I know which one to cut on for each color. I would trace this out and make all these individual pattern pieces, but I really do not have the energy to do that. So instead I'm just going to pin it and then pin along here. And then it does take a little bit of like time and fiddling to cut it out this way, but it is quicker than tracing off a million pattern pieces, because there are a lot. So pretty much everything has lines except for the collar pieces and lining. So the pocket I've done as well, so that when it sits on the body, it's going to follow the shape as well. Same for the inside pocket facing. Sleeves both have it. And I did do this on the toile, so the lines matched up pretty much anyway, but I also went through and double checked to make sure they all lined up along the seams where they're going to join, so that it's a little bit easier and neater. And then the facing as well has it. The only kind of tricky bit, so the trickiest bit was this collar, because this collar folds back, and I want this to continue onto the collar and not have a different curve on the collar. I want it to all look the same. So when it was on the mannequin, I made note of where the fold was. It's a natural fold that occurs because of how the jacket was pattern made, but I worked it out to be about this angle. I'm hoping that's correct, otherwise I'm going to be forcing it to be at that angle by lots of pressing. So what I did was I mirrored this line along that fold. So I did that on the facing and also on the front piece. So there is kind of like a weird point there, but that's where I found it folded in half, and you can see I drew the line there, so it does all match up really nicely. And I think it's going to look very, very cool once it's done. So now I get to cut it out. All right, everything is cut out, so all of the pieces of the main fabric, but also the interfacing and lining. I've decided to do strip interfacing along the hem. The pattern does have an option to do a blocked fused front, but I don't particularly like that. And also this is a heavier weight, like it is more of a coating weight. So I feel like it will be fine without that extra interfacing, and also I would have to cut it along all the curves, and I'm not about to do all that. So I'm going to apply all the interfacings and pre-press these as instructed by the instructions. But I also want to pick which buttons, because I've decided I want to do a bound buttonhole. So the buttonhole will be on the orange panel, and I want to do a bound one because I just think it's going to look a little bit nicer than a regular buttonhole. I have this gold button, which I love. It's super cool, but I don't know if it's going to be too much with like all these colors, and then on top of that a gold button. But I do have a self-covered button, so I was thinking of just doing a self-covered button in the orange, and then it's sort of a little bit more subtle because it's just orange on orange. So I put a poll up on my Instagram, currently leaning towards self-covered, as much as I love this gold. But I'm thinking maybe if I can kind of make it big enough for either button to fit in there, then at least I can pick when it's finished. Usually I pick buttons if I don't have a very clear choice when the garment's actually finished, and I can lay them out and have a look. But because this buttonhole needs to be done as one of the first steps, I'm going to need to choose the size to make it now. So yeah, I'm going to go iron all of these and get all the interfacing pieces prepped as well. So yeah. All right, so everything is fused. It needs to be fused. So with these pieces, like this front facing, which is in 4 pieces, I cut the interfacing as one piece, and then I cut it along the lines, so it looks a little bit like janky on the inside. But it also means that these seam allowances don't have interfacing on them, which I think is just going to reduce the bulk a little bit when I sew them in. So now I'm just going to follow the instructions vaguely. I've read through them and I kind of have a good idea of how to put it together, but before I can really do anything, I've got to sew all of these panels together. So I'm going to sew them together and then press them all, and I'm going to have to like clip into some of these corners and curves and make it all look really, really neat. So I'm going to do that for the front facing, for the little pocket bits, for the sleeves, for the front and back, like heaps. Pretty much every piece is cut into a million little pieces. So I'm going to do that, and then I can do the bound buttonhole and the pocket. All right, so I have pieced all of the pieces together. So it's all one big piece. So I've done that for the facings, front body. I just can't show you because Prince is sitting on them. But I've also clipped in to all of these seams, and I'm going to press them all flat. So the reason I've clipped in is because otherwise it won't press quite so nicely, because you can see how much of a big gap there is there, and those will overlap a little bit. So I might cut away some of the bulk as I press as well if I feel it's necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of these pieces here. All right, so I've put the pockets in. I'm really happy with how they've turned out because they match up pretty damn well. This one side's not as good as this side is. This side is like perfectly matching, and then the facing also all matches up. I also did the bound buttonhole, and then I've made the same hole on the facing, so when I put them together I'll slip stitch them together. But yeah, really happy with how it's turning out, and the seams look so nice now that they're all pressed. So yeah, now I'm going to move on to the next steps, which are sleeves and everything. It's really coming together, and I'm really happy with all the effort I've been putting into match these, I've been spending a little bit more time doing things to make sure it's perfect. It's coming along. It's now the side seams are sewn up, so it kind of looks a little bit crazy, but the sleeves are somewhat attached and the lines are meeting up across the shoulder. Very happy. Even at the front here, when it sits properly on my shoulder, it is matching up. So I'm very happy with how it's coming together. So I've just got to do up the side seams, then it's onto the collar and lining. Very happy. I am nearly done. I haven't got the lining in, but I wanted to try it on to see how everything is lining up, and I'm really happy. Like the sleeves even line up with the panel lines, and when this is where the button will be, lines up. The only thing is the lapel kind of falls at a slightly different angle. As you can see, that doesn't line up. So what I'm going to do is I am going to try to like steam it so that it folds exactly where I intended it to. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. It's really close. I just think it would be cool if it really finishes, and then that way when it's done up as well, it will line up with the other side. Pockets are looking good and everything is lining up really nicely. Alright, so I kind of forgot to film an outro to this vlog, so hopefully this recording over footage of me wearing the coat is enough. So pretty much I think the last footage was me sewing up all the lining, little bits and pieces that be sewn by hand. So I hand stitched all of that, the little bound buttonhole stitched on. But yeah, I've worn this out a few times now and got heaps of compliments. I'm in love with this coat. I'm so happy with how it turned out. And yeah, I'm very happy to be wearing it all winter long. You can see me wearing it here. So yeah, if you enjoy watching these, please go give me a follow on Instagram. I'm far more active over there. And hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. And I'll link anything relevant down below as well. Thank you for watching. Bye.